Welcome to this new episode of No U-Turn. Hope you enjoy. Welcome everybody. In today's episode I wanted to make a response to Prince of Queens and the whole Milo incident. Let's get started.
Milo Yiannopoulos and gay pedophilia hysteria. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and I did not want to make another video where I talk about Milo Yiannopoulos, certainly not defending him right after his remarks about the transgender community, which I do not endorse.
So this is not really an important issue, but why do you think it's necessary for you to make a comment about his opinions about transgender issues and why you don't endorse it or do endorse it, and why do you want to defend him or don't defend him based on those issues? Do you really think that people will attack you on what he said in the past and your opinions about that?
But I have not only gotten a bunch of requests for me to talk about the pedophilia situation, but I have also been meaning to make a video on the subject anyway, even though it is a topic that doesn't particularly interest me as an individual, maybe because I'm not a pedophile and never had sex with an older man when I was underage.
So this is really an interesting part, I think. What you're um, what you're clearly doing is making a perspective from the child to the adult. So a child can't be a pedophile, not if they have a child can't be a pedophile. So what you're essentially saying is you are not a pedophile because as a child you didn't have an attraction to older guys. I think the more important it would be if you said that you're not a pedophile because at this moment are not attracted to childs.
First off, I do think that this is a smear campaign, especially considering his statements were from a while ago. But before I actually get into the details about the specifics, I just need to point out that a lot of this hysteria wouldn't happen if Milo wasn't a gay guy. So if Milo wants to talk about never being the victim of homophobia after this, that's a bit weird. And don't harp on the semantics of the term homophobia, because this is not just people being anti-gay. Pedophilia, hysteria around gay men is full-blown phobia stuff. Sure, the statements largely revolved around Milo's personal young sex experiences, but as he said repeatedly, he thinks that things tend to be different in gay culture than in heterosexual culture, and I agree with that.
So why do you think that it is different? Why do you think that why do you think that heterosexual people don't have the same feelings as you did when you have a child? Or, well, please explain.
I mean, think of it like this. Gay guys around the age of 13 onward are just as horny as every other young fella. But unlike straight boys, they don't get almost any chances of having a young gay guy their age to have sex with.
So what you're trying to do is to explain why, again, from the perspective of the child, why it is common for, well, you're going to explain that a little bit later, but you're going to explain that it is common for a child to have an attraction to older guys because apparently there are not enough gay people of the same age. But why do you think that, for instance, a heterosexual boy wouldn't be attracted to a older female, like for instance, a teacher or somebody, well, doesn't matter really. Why do you think that is?
They often purposefully seek out older gay men because they feel like that's the only option. I am not saying this is either a good thing or a bad thing. I fortunately didn't feel compelled to do this myself, and the only time I fooled around with anybody when I was in early puberty, it happened to be my friend who was exactly the same age, though we didn't have penetrative sex and we wouldn't have known how to if we wanted to.
Well, that's good to know, I guess.
Regardless, for whatever reason, likely having to do with stories about the ancient Greeks who had intergenerational relationships between old men and young guys, there's a huge stereotype that gay men are pedophiles.
Well, to be honest, the whole problem is that you were essentially perpetuating that stereotype because you are saying that children, the gay children in this case, have a sexual interest in older gay guys because there is a lack of uh, same age uh, partners.
And this is a gigantic, shitty thing that we regularly do have to deal with as gay men. Gay men have to worry about pedophilia allegations so much more than anybody else, which is kind of weird because I notice a lot more straight guys being into young women than I do gay guys being into relatively young guys. At least from my personal anecdotal experiences. Usually, half of the gay guys I know are into older guys, and have been for some time. I personally haven't had sex with.
Well, that can't be true because if if every gay guy would be attracted only to older guys, then the older guys would also be attracted to older guys. So then nobody would be attracted to younger guys. So that's not possible.
Any guys under the age of 18 ever, minus the friend I fooled around with when we were both super young. Because past college, I almost entirely dated and slept with older guys. Yes, I have been a bit of what we call a daddy chaser myself. Still, there's no good way to explain that feeling that you get as an adult gay male, especially when you're over 30, when you're around parents and you can sense that they're uncomfortable with you being around their kids because you're a gay guy. It's just a feeling, but you know when it's happening.
Yeah, but you still have to explain why this is specifically because you're gay and not specifically because you're male. I don't know if you noticed, but heterosexual males have the same problem in the sense that if I am at a kindergarten or some sort of playground or something like that, we have the same problem. It's a male thing, not a gay thing. I guess I think.
Sometimes it's blatant. Even nice, non homophobic people will get noticeably uncomfortable if you decide to have a few drinks at a dinner party with their kids around. And it's not even confined to male children. It's like they think that because you're gay, you turn bisexual when it comes to children, which is ridiculous.
Not really. If you look at the research that has been done on pedophilia, it's what that pedophilia doesn't really have anything to do with the gender of the child, or at least that's what they are saying. I don't know from experience, of course, but what they're saying is that um, um, what they're saying is that pedophilia is it's a little bit the same thing as rape, in the sense that rape is not really a sexual thing but more a power and control thing. And what they are saying is that pedophilia has the same sort of aspects in it, that it's not really about the gender of the child but more about the age of the child. At least that's what I read in a couple of research papers. So if parents are afraid of somebody being a pedophile, I guess it's obvious that they are going to they're going to not worry about the sex of the child in this case.
Obviously. Even my own mother seemed to be affected by the mass cultural stigma against gay men interacting with children, though I don't think she actually believes gay men to be more likely to be pedophiles. I'm pretty sure she believes that that is bullshit. Still, I was mentioning to her that I wanted to maybe volunteer to teach a ping pong class at a community center to get some exercise and to get out of the house more. And I obviously meant for kids because how many adults do you know who would take a ping pong class? What was her response? She mentioned immediately that they very thoroughly vet any adult male who might want to teach a class to make sure they are not pedophiles.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. Is that she is saying that a adult male is being checked for being a pedophile, not a adult gay male. I think that she is worrying about you being a pedophile, or you, or um, I don't think she is worrying about you being pedophile, but what she is saying is that if you're going to do something with children and you are a male, then people going to check on you and etc. etc. And probably I don't know for sure. I don't know your mother, of course, but I guess she's saying they're going to check you. And if they find out you're gay or whatever, then maybe they have some sort of problem with that. I don't know. Maybe she's trying to say something like that.
which was pretty awkward. I have no idea if my mom would say that to her straight son. Maybe, maybe not, but I don't even have a brother. That
You could try and just ask your mother if she would do that, or maybe talk about it with her and ask why she would say something like that.
all said, as gay guys especially, my personal feeling is that if we are allowed to be open with our sexualities and don't suffer from a lot of weird sexual repression that can come out in creepy ways later in life, I legitimately think that psychologically healthy gay guys are probably less likely to have inappropriate pedophilic tendencies than heterosexual guys. And I say that for a very specific reason. Once you get to a certain age as a gay guy, you realize that lots of young boys are uncomfortable around you. And this isn't the same for straight guys with young girls. Especially if the kids know that you are gay, a lot of them tend to get weird. And even if they won't admit it, their parents likely are uncomfortable with you being around their kids. That said, it becomes extremely uncomfortable as a gay guy to be around male children on occasion.
I really don't understand this sort of reasoning. Are you saying that pedophilia is a choice, or are you saying that yeah, well, you're essentially saying that pedophilia is something that somebody chooses?
And although I know there's sexual masochists out there that get off on feeling uncomfortable, I can only assume that most gay men feel like myself and get a deeply engraved automatic reflex of disgust when you ever even consider being attracted to an underage guy. I think everybody should admit to themselves that when they see a 15-year-old who is in good shape and is overwhelmingly good looking in a bathing suit at the beach, they can tell that it is an attractive person, male or female. When Joe Rogan said that he thinks to himself that a hot 15-year-old girl will be hot when she's older, I think that he was just covering his own ass to a certain degree to not sound like a creep. I think that what really goes on in people's minds is that we can see a fully developed young person, and we might even be attracted to them, but
Yeah, but being attracted to a body or somebody of a younger age doesn't mean that you have to immediately jump to have a sexual desire to be with that person, to that person. Um, if I see food, I can recognize that food can be delicious or looks beautiful without essentially having the desire to immediately eat it. It's something different.
then that instinct that we have trained ourselves with kicks in very quickly, and we lose our sex drive towards the individual because it is a turnoff to feel like you are creeping out on somebody underage. I like to think of this kind of like another beach metaphor. Let's say you were at a nude beach and you saw a naked man or woman, depending upon your preference, and they were sleeping with their legs spread right apart. Their legs are spread in just the right way that you could easily just go over there and start fucking them.
Yeah, that's really funny. The the mental picture here is, well, exotic. Let's put it that way.
And they are super fucking hot. Don't tell me you wouldn't at least look for a moment and think to yourself, damn, they're hot. You would, in fact, be attracted to them.
Yeah, but being attracted and then, well, the mental picture. Okay.
But of course, they're also a sleeping person, so you wouldn't go over there and start fucking them, even if you could get away with it, unless you're a total fucking psycho. It's not even that you make a conscious choice to, not be attracted to them. You just realize that they're sleeping. And then the thought of raping them turns you off because it's gross to you. So you probably won't even look at them for all that long either because you feel like a creep. You know that this is not socially acceptable to have sex with an unconscious person or to just stare at them for a long time. And so it's kind of similar to when you know that it is not socially acceptable to have sex with even fully developed and willing young people who are underage.
Yeah, but that's a well, that's a really strange part of argument. What you're saying is that you are not raping people only because it's not socially acceptable. It's it's a strange thing. You're not raping people because it's wrong, and you should feel morally wrong about it as well. And that same goes for a child. If you see a child that is attractive, then you still should feel morally wrong about having, well, desires about uh, having sexual intercourse with the child, or sexual feelings with the child, I guess.
And therefore it turns you off. That's how adults think about sex with underage people, usually. However, it gets super complicated when you start taking into account the perspective of a young person who had consensual sex with an older person, especially a young person that never feels bad about it as they age into adult life. You can read an account from a woman who had consensual sex with David Bowie when she was 14. She pursued David Bowie for at least a few weeks, if not longer, and even competed with a friend over who would get to have sex with him first.
Yeah, but this is now you're changing the perspective again. First, you were talking about gay children having attraction to a older gay guy. Then you change the perspective from the older person to the younger child. And then pedophilia is the attraction from an older person to the child. So the child is not at fault here, but the older person is at fault. So if you're talking about a 14-year-old child having attraction to David Bowie, that's no problem. The girl should be that's natural. But the problem is the other way around. If David Bowie does then the next step and goes and have sexual things with the girl in this case, then he is wrong, but not the child for wanting it.
And she never regretted it. She considers it a wonderful experience. Milo says that he was the predator when he had sex with older men. And that is not uncommon from my understanding. I have heard numerous accounts of young people pursuing older people for sexual relationships, and it's hard to know what happens on an individual basis between every couple. I mean, it's entirely different if some 13-year-old boy goes to a park and gets fucked by a man in his 40s in a bush than it is if a 25-year-old sports coach ends up having sex with a 15-year-old dude
No,
after.
there's totally no difference because the the power dynamic stays the same. The problem is not the child wanting it or don't wanting it, but the problem is that the guy, uh, the older person, should not have sexual relations with the younger child. That's the whole problem. It's not the problem from the child to the older one. It's the older one to the child, and you're constantly shifting uh, the perspective. So if you're talking about yourself, then you accept that there is something wrong if you are sexually attracted to a child. But when you change the perspective from the child, then you're suddenly seeing no problem with the relation at all. But you're forgetting to look from the different angle. The coach is wrong if he wants to have sexual relations with the child, and the guy in the park is wrong if he wants to have fuck the guy in the bush. So it's both wrong. It doesn't matter.
The 15-year-old pursued him for a year, especially between gay men, who again have difficulty finding people their age to have sex with when they're young. While I will state again that I have a personal aversion to having sex with guys significantly younger than myself because it sets off almost an immediate alarm in my head to even think about this,
And
which
so it should be. So again, now you're changing the perspective from yourself to the younger guy, and then you recognize that it's wrong to have sex with somebody who's younger than you. But as soon as you change your perspective from a child that is pursuing a older guy, then the older guy in this picture should also have the same repulsive uh, trigger.
Is very unsexy for me. I can't imagine that some guys who coach 15-year-olds eventually grow very comfortable around the young males and decide that maybe one of them is mature enough to make an informed decision. So, would it be such a horrible crime for both of them to partake in consensual sex? In some countries, it isn't a crime at all. But you can make that decision for yourself if it's a bad thing. The
No, but there is not for nothing. There is an age of consent. That's not because not every child is adult enough to make that decision. But the age of consent is not based on a particular child with a particular reason of consent. It is made because over the whole, you shouldn't do that because there is a power dynamic in play. You should recognize that.
bottom line is that once somebody goes through puberty, they get horny, they start giving off pheromones, and eventually somebody is going to be attracted to them whether or not it is somebody their age. In a perfect world, everybody would have their first sexual experiments with somebody close to their age. But again, it is often a lot more complicated for gay men for the reasons I already said. So, knowing that something along these lines happened to Milo, the only option he has in his adult life is trying to make sense of it. He can't spend every conversation he ever gets into about it acting as if he was some abused victim. Because when he remembers it, he remembers being fully willing and enjoying it. So if he said otherwise, he would be severely compromising his integrity, which granted he doesn't have a lot of, but it's definitely out of character for him to play the victim of sexual abuse. It doesn't match the narrative that he peddles. That said, people kept asking me about this one specific line, which was in relation to when Milo was on Joe Rogan and he talked about some specific parties in Hollywood that he attended. He said that there were a lot of young boys at those parties, or a lot of boys who were very young, very young boys at those parties. So when he said that, does boys mean technically adults? I'm not sure. What I would take it to mean, and this is just an educated guess from having been around the block in gay land for 20 years, is that Milo meant that he did not know how old the young men were who were using drugs and having sex with older men. And he didn't ask. I would imagine they were probably no younger than 16 or so, which I believe is definitely still illegal, though I have no idea. I wasn't there. He could, however, be referring to young people that looked 18 years old as boys. That is a definite possibility. You see, Milo is not really condoning pedophilia, in my opinion, mainly because he said that the law was about the right age, though he defines pedophilia as prepubescent attraction, and he thinks it's fine for some people to have different standards of consent, and when they are ready at different ages, it's fine to him or whatever, especially in the gay world, probably for the reasons I articulated earlier. Sure, Milo excused the priest that abused him, but that seemed to be largely just humor, and I think he is allowed to use humor as a way to talk about his past.
Yeah, of course, but that's totally not a problem. If you look at what Milo is saying, he is saying that he, as a child, didn't mind what the priest was doing, but that doesn't excuse the priest. He can excuse the priest all he wants, but that doesn't excuse the priest. The priest was wrong in this picture because he shouldn't have sexual relations with Milo in this case. That's the same thing as you are, in essentially, you are defending the the coach, the boys coach, for having sexual relations with a underage child. That is what you're essentially saying, and you're excusing that by saying that it is the child who is going after the adult. But in the relation between a child and an adult, the adult should always be the adult. So he should always remember that he shouldn't be having sexual relations with the child. So that's the wrong part of it. In a sense, you are doing the same as Milo did, and that is defending older guys having sexual relations with a child because the child has sexual relations or has sexual desires for the older person. But the adult should always stay the adult and always be responsible what he is doing, not what the child is doing. Your perspective is off.
Even if he has strange feelings about it. I know plenty of guys who have had such things in their past who use humor to cope, and I think that's fair. So, well, I think that it's a shame that Milo has ended up losing his book deal. I absolutely do think that this also is a sign that homophobia is alive and well in culture because of the extreme nuance of what was actually said and the reaction, as well as how different it would be if some straight guy was on Joe Rogan talking about losing his virginity to an older woman at 13. And I just think people should generally calm down about this one specific detail. Milo has said plenty of disagreeable things, in my opinion.
And I think that is the reason why he's being attacked so hard. It's not because he's gay. It's not because he is male. It's not because he is some guy saying something on Joe Rogan, but because he is Milo. He said a lot of controversial shit. He does trigger people a lot. So when they get the chance to tackle him, they will, and they did with full force. So it's probably not because he's gay, but it's probably because well, they couldn't touch him in any other way, so they tried this.
And I can't say I completely 100% endorse his feelings on this topic, but I certainly think he should be allowed to have a nuanced discussion about age of consent laws, and in particular how they affect gay culture and how they differ between heterosexual culture. I think he should be able to have that discussion without people creating a giant smear campaign to ruin his entire reputation by saying he endorses pedophilia. I don't think that's what he was saying. That's all I have to say. Drop me a comment, help me out on Patreon if I seem cool to you, and stay tuned.
Well, thank you, Prince of Queens. I hope you enjoyed my response to your video. And I put the description in I put the link to your video in the description box. And as always, please like and subscribe. And well, until the next time. Bye.